Call the meeting. Roll call.
Commissioner 1, Precinct 1, Mr. James.
Here.
Precinct 2, Mr. Casterline.
Here.
Precinct 3, Ms. Russo.
Here.
Precinct 4, Ms. Bobak.
Here.
Present. Yes, all present accounted for. That's right. We do have a presentation this morning, PowerPoint presentation highlighting the provisions of the request for proposal for a medical facility operator manager. General Land Office, contract number 20-065-098-C27 and Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery. Kim?
Good morning. We, both William and Whitson and I will be doing the presentation today, and he is going to start out with a presentation, and I'll regulate the PowerPoint. We can pull that up.
Great.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. Appreciate your time this morning to cover a recovery project that is a critical one in our plan. We know that it has lots of public support, and our team is very determined to bring this forward and make it work for Aransas County. It has been a very, very long and winding road, and that is due to the complexity of the process, both locally and with the federal guidelines and grant that we have been blessed to receive. We also feel like it's important to be very, very flexible in this process, and we'll kind of go over that with you. We're very open to responding to what the market conditions and the economic conditions are telling us as we move forward to what we believe will be a successful project. Next slide. Overall, what we're here to discuss today is where we are today, what we've been doing, where we are in the process. We have been monitoring multiple sources of feedback, and that feedback is a continuous process. It's something that we always have to have our ear to the ground and be responsive to. We've received some criticism from some folks for that, but I really stand above that criticism because you have to pay attention to the shifting sands if you're going to bring a project like this forward. It is, of course, subject to technical changes based on the dynamics of the situation with the grant. And we are in front of you today to specifically request authorization to proceed with what we're calling the RFP, or request for proposals. This request for proposals, the RFP, is for operators to come in and operate medically and deliver medical services for the facility that is built with a grant. Next slide. The RFP process, of course, follows the federal law, 2 CFR 200, because the operator will receive substantial benefit from the expenditure of federal grant funds. That is why the process is guided by 2 CFR. Aransas County Medical Services, Inc., ACMSI, and the county will both cooperate in issuing this RFP. The finalization of the RFP is not yet done, but we are working hard to obtain feedback from the evaluation committee that we've formed, and we'll go over that specific in a minute. We'll obviously listen to any comments that the Commissioner Court has in general. And then, of course, we are always listening and coordinating with GLO because they were the ones that provided us with the grant funds. We are going to utilize the evaluation committee for the RFP, primarily composed citizens with knowledge and local expertise and understanding of the healthcare field. Next slide. So who's on the committee? We have an outstanding group, and we have Commissioner Pat Rousseau, who is holding the elected person's seat on the committee. We have a former hospital administrator, Nancy Kinkler. We also have
Fading away. You're fading away.
Hello?
You're fading away. You need to start over after Pat Russo.
Okay. We also have Nancy Kinkler, a former hospital administrator and educator. Jennifer Ristette, who is a local hospital administrator and educator. We have Dr. Bruce. We have Blake McDavid, who is the chair of the ACMSI. Randy Bingham, who's a local physician's assistant. I think he works for the county. We also have Matt Brewington, who has worked a long time in the healthcare field. And of course, if we need to, we have a couple of alternates just in case. We also are going to receive technical assistance from Texas A&M Rural School of Health. And we also are going to be reaching out to the Texas Rural Hospital Association, and as well as the Texas Department of Agriculture. They have people that we can call on as well. Next slide.
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
Are all of the members of the committee residents of Aransas County? I've been asked that. Or are they specialized members that come in with expertise?
I believe most of them are, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't being critical one way or the other. I just was wondering.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that the majority, I think all of them are Aransas County residents.
They are, aren't they?
Okay.
The only one I don't know about is Dr. Bruce, if he lives here or in San Pat, but yes, everyone else is
he
a
works here.
resident of
Yes, he
Aransas
works
County, several of them very long-term.
Right. Thank you.
Next slide. So what are we going to be calling on the committee to do? They, of course, are going to help us complete the request for proposals. You know, we're going to get their feedback on the specifics to make sure that we customize the terms to the Aransas County medical market. They are also active in making suggestions on vendors that we can send a proposal to make sure everything is covered in good order. They're also active in telling us ways that we can better market the proposal to make sure that it's widely distributed and that many people have it and have access to it. Obviously, when the proposal goes out, it runs through the normal RFP process, which will be monitored by staff in compliance with 2 CFR. And then once the proposals come in, whatever they are, then their job will be to apply the ranking criteria to the proposals. And we are proposing, and the way the structure of the RFP is written right now is a 2-step process where they would, let's just say we get 5 proposals, well, they would cut it down to the top 2, 3, whatever is the most appropriate number. And then the top ranked folks would go forward in the process, and then those that are eliminated would go back. So we would have them go back and then re-rank them so that you get the benefit of their best thinking and the best proposals in their opinion according to the criteria. And then they will then, once that process is completed, make their recommendations.
You faded away again.
Okay, they will make their recommendations to the Commissioners Court and to our partner ACMSI. They will then of course provide advice in the negotiations as we need to nail down the details of the operating agreement, and we'll cover that in a minute. The Commissioners Court role in this process obviously is to consider the committee proposals when they come forward and vote on that as necessary. We also will ask you to work with successful proposals and ACMSI in the finalization of an operating agreement or an operating contract Again, the proposals will ferret out who is the best to activate and program and deliver medical services in the facility to be built. And then, of course, the terms and conditions of the operation would be covered in what we're calling an operating agreement. And we've covered that before, but a lot of people are asking a lot of questions about certain specifics and details. And unfortunately, until we get the proposal, until we know what the right mix of services is, till everything's settled, then we can negotiate the details of that contract and bring it back for your consideration. Next slide. As I said, we were working hard on the distribution and marketing of the proposal so that people nationwide have access to this information, as well as in the coastal bend of Texas. We are working with them to direct email the identified vendor list. We are going to provide the RFP to relative venues required in the solicitation according to federal regulations, 2 CFR 200. We have to send information to historically underutilized business or hubs. This yellow highlighted area is a committee recommendation we've already received to send it to industry associations, both nationally and in Texas. There are outlets in the universities for SBA type contacts to spread the word in that community. There are sites that specialize in advertising opportunities in healthcare. We've also been in touch with real estate organizations that focus on the healthcare industry. And then Texas A&M, as part of their services to us under the contract, they also have a mailing list, and they have made that available to us and will cooperate and work with us. And of course, we'll be working with the Texas Association of Rural Community Hospitals, or a group called TORCH. So that kind of brings you up to speed on all of the outreach and the marketing for the RFP. It's a very exhaustive effort we've been through to organize all that data and information. What about the timeline? What are we looking at here? Well, right now, the grant contract calls for us to complete everything in August of 2022. However, we know that all of this effort can't be completed by then, and we are in active discussions with GLO. There are federal registered notices saying due to the pandemic, we can request extensions. And right now, this is our current schedule, which looks like it's going to be completed in the May of 2024 timeframe. Again, that's an estimate. It's a snapshot in time. Every time we move forward on this, it depends on another domino falling in the right order for us to meet this schedule. But we feel very confident that we can do multiple things at once, and that this schedule is achievable. So with that, I will turn it over to Kim, who hopefully will dive into additional details, and we won't have trouble hearing her.
Yeah, just briefly on this estimated timeline, the timeline that's on your screen is just for the RFP itself. And so it's a several month process. And that May 24 that he was referencing, that is for this year. So we have a several month process. We've already, of course, passed the first step where we've turned in some things to GLO. They have actually taken a look at the RFP. They are not going to give us, until we get all of the approvals done with the change of location and the time frame, they're not going, they'll do reviews, but they're not going to give you a final review on anything until an amendment is done. And so we have to move forward in order to stay on a schedule that will meet their expectations, and also HUD's limitations on extensions. We have to get started on this process now. So this RFP process that we're talking about would end this May 24th. The 2024 that he's talking about is with the extension that he was referencing earlier.
The overall project and the extension we hope to get.
Yes, which would be in the summer timeframe of 2024. So we wanted to go over some of the highlights of the RFP. This reflects some of the discussions that we've had with the GLO and what they're looking for. It also reflects, I've highlighted the changes that the evaluation committee made in their first meeting this last week. A lot of people have already turned in all of their comments, and so I've reflected that in here. Some is just a little bit of tweaking that isn't really a highlight of the RFP. It's just small details that we're updating the RFP with. But I want to talk about the highlights today. So we're still at the same location. We're at 400 Enterprise, which is the ACMSI site. As indicated before, we're still looking at a nonprofit or a for-profit. Either is eligible under the grant. We're really wanting the private market to define what we have. So the RFP is written such that it's very open, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the uses, but we really want proposers that can give us the most feasible, the most applicable project for our community. And of course, it still has to meet all of the CDBG requirements.
Yeah. One quick question. While you're, whenever you start receiving the RFPs, everything, that is not public information until the committee has reviewed it, right?
That's correct. And that
It's
it comes
proprietary
to,
information.
it is. And in the RFP, we have all the state language in there about
Right.
things staying, what they need to do to keep their information, their proprietary information confidential.
Okay. The reason I asked that is whenever we were looking at several years ago, that was a real question in the public. Well, why don't we know what they're proposing? Well, that's not really at that particular point. That's really not what they're proposing. That's what they're intending to propose if they're selected. Right?
And there's a lot of bandwidth between what someone puts in for an initial, I want to get in through the door and have a discussion versus, what the final deal looks like.
Once the final deal is selected, whenever it comes to Commissioner's Court, then it will be public.
It will be. I commensurate this as the same as an economic development prospect. Right. It is. It's a private company coming in and proposing an investment in the community.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Okay, we have been working on and cleaning up some language on the uses, and this reflects some of the changes that the committee made. Originally, we had outlined the term that we used was micro hospital, and the committee said that is too much of a narrowing language. The reason why we wrote the term micro hospital is because when the A&M did the study, that was what they thought was the best fit for our community at that time. And they used the term micro hospital because of the number of beds that were there. The committee is recommending that we keep it broader. And I looked up real quick because I couldn't remember all the discussions about it, but some of the definitions, in addition to just it's a hospital, general acute care, as well as psychiatric, specialized and rehab hospitals, and long-term acute care. So what they're saying is don't narrow your language as tightly as that, but keep it on a broader perspective for hospitals. Also, any kind of outpatient facility. We had already talked about ambulatory surgery centers. On the list, still on the list, is a federally qualified health center. That was not on our original list. We received an inquiry from ACMSI to take a look at whether we should consider the federally qualified health centers. That is still under study. And I'm looking for a final recommendation from the committee on whether that needs to stay on our preferred list. Now, I say preferred list because if you look at the very bottom of the list, it really opens it up for other things that we may have missed. There may be niches in the community and unmet needs in the community that we're not aware of. And so it does allow for, quote, other medical services and facilities. And that does qualify under the GLO definition. It meets an urgent need. It is meeting the enhanced medical facilities. So this is an RFP. This is an opportunity for the market to respond. And so we want to leave it as open as we can. And then in addition, rural health clinic, we've had health clinics on the list for quite some time. That would be general and specialty type services that would be involved with that, potentially. The size and configuration of the facility, it's going to be defined by the market. And they're going to come in and tell us exactly, it's going to look at the market, it's going to look at industry practices, and of course, it's going to be reflective of the operator proposals. And also, it is limited by the budget, and the RFP is very clear about that. A proposer can come in with a larger facility budget than what we have, but it's clear in there. This is our share. Anything above that would be borne by the operator itself. So that could be a larger footprint. It could involve more equipment. It could be a variety of things in a way that they would come in and propose. But it is clear in the proposal, this is what we have to work with, and that's what the limitation is. And then the other thing that we're adding that I think is really crucial, it was already in there, but after talking to GLO, we felt like it was even more important that we really ask for them to be more specific about what improvements they're going to be doing and what level of contribution. So we've upped the language on that and even made it more clear and is a significant evaluation factor.
Kim?
Yes.
Talk to me for a minute about where urgent care might fit into those definitions.
The urgent care, I believe, would be in the outpatient facilities, and urgent care was discussed at the committee level, and the committee was asking why we didn't, specifically provide for that. And so that is open both under the outpatient facilities and the other medical facilities.
Just for clarity in the record, can you define what the technical term for urgent care really involves? Because that's a little confusing sometimes.
Yeah. William, do you want to take a shot at that?
Yes. The urgent care is basically a facility that could see patients that may be ill or sick or injured, but don't need to go to a hospital emergency room. So it's kind of a doctor's office that is open longer hours and can see patients that have illnesses or sicknesses or injuries that maybe don't rise to the level of going to an emergency room.
Well, that seems like that would be natural to go into that, because people don't go to a micro hospital to go in a hospital necessarily. They just have something that can't be handled by an emergency room, or really shouldn't be handled by an emergency room. It seems to me like that would be a non sequitur in the fact that it's just, that's what we're providing in a medical facility, is where people can go for injuries or diseases or whatever that they normally would go into, maybe beyond a doctor, or maybe the doctor would send them over there. It seems to me like that wouldn't even be a question.
And what I'm hearing a lot of interest in is, like Jack is saying, after hours is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And also walk-in ability for something that can't wait for, an appointment next week. So urgency without being necessarily life-threatening emergency. But the really important thing is very long after hours access. I mean, preferably 24 hours, but certainly way after hours, and the ability and staffing to see people rapidly. So we're talking things like stitches and broken legs. You can't wait, or, an acute infection or whatever. You can't wait. even to the next day or till, you know, how hard it is to get a doctor's appointment in this town. They'll tell you you have to wait weeks. We need same day service for some urgencies. And I bring up urgent care a lot because the many things we can do in a healthcare facility, everybody would love to have them locally, but they're not that hard to get by going to Portland. But the one thing that's really hard to get by going to Portland is, you know, a fairly urgent need at 8 o'clock in the evening. So that's what I probably hear most consistently from my constituents.
We're not excluding an urgent care facility, correct, Kim?
And I'm just talking about emphasizing
No,
that as
right.
one of the things we're really
It's on
interested
the
in.
table. It's on the table, is included in this language.
Right. And I know that it's included. It just sort of is, it's included sort of silently. And I'm asking that we give it a lot of emphasis and talk to people about how very much we would like to see that. I realize it's still got to be something that's, you know, financially attractive to them.
Right. And part of that's going to be the Medicaid, Medicare reimbursement aspect of it, and who's proposing whether they're eligible for that.
Well, now,
So,
whenever we originally started this, it's my recollection that we were doing this because Code 3 could not handle Medicare and Medicaid type thing. And so to even give a consideration that might be limited, to me, goes against what I thought the basis of beginning to look at this as a whole. I just want us to make sure that what we're looking for is a place where any citizen can go to get taken care of whenever they're not necessarily bleeding profusely, but where they're sick and they need to go as Wendy said, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's not really what you would designate as something where you need an ambulance. You know, whenever we were talking about this, and I think we're on the right track, but what I'm saying is even to think that urgent care might not be included in that, to me, flies in the face of what we're trying to accomplish in the first place. What we're trying to accomplish in the first place is that citizens of Aransas County has good medical care for the first 24 or 48 hours. You know, if they need to be stabilized, if they're having a heart attack or something like that, where they can go to, they don't have to go to Portland because it's, you know, we don't have the facility to do that. I'm not looking for somebody for a stay of more than three days, but to me, that's the definition of urgent care, is they need to go somewhere and be treated until they can get in to see their physician or a physician that can see them in some way. So to even think that might not be included, or to even think that we might not be able to service Medicare and Medicaid patients, to me is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody gets sick, needs to go to the doctor's not available, they go to.
yeah, the proposal requires that they be able to accept Medicare and Medicaid, and then there's also extra points associated with it, as well as indigent care.
But in the end, I think we're looking for somebody that is going to be able to survive. The medical facility is going to be able to survive and be here long term.
Right.
In the past, I mean, we had one that had an emergency room and urgent care, and they're not here anymore. And so I think it all falls back to the providers that submit a proposal are going to submit something they feel like they can survive with and be here long term.
Yeah.
I think that's really, to me, what we're really looking for is some type of a long-term improvement in medical facilities. Okay?
Medical care in Aransas County, absolutely.
And we will be sure to let the committee know that. We can add some add emphasis on the urgent care aspect. And then the other thing I think that's really crucial, I was really impressed with the committee members that were willing to serve. It's very deep. And I think you'll see in a little bit, they've asked me and William for a lot more baseline information, because they want to have all the information to really look at the viability of the facility. And they have the capacity to really do that, to take a look at what our demographics are, our statistics, and what they're proposing to really determine whether what they're proposing is viable and will serve it.
Yeah, go
I
ahead,
guess what
Kim,
would-
because that's important. We'll cover that so that the commission knows that all the details that we'll be pulling together.
So let me just add one more thing. I'm also extremely interested in feasibility. I don't want us spending the grant money that we get this one time on something that's going to fail. Nevertheless, I'm hoping that urgent care criteria, especially after hours and walk-in same day, urgent attention, can be given a really high priority in the rating system. I mean, I think sometimes these things, the rating system controls the decision. I would really rather see high marks given for people who can be open after hours and see people quickly, as opposed to somebody who can give you a really great local imaging and radiology, which we can already get in Portland.
May I say something too? I appreciate the comments from Commissioner Cheney and Commissioner Laubach. And I stress what Kim said, especially we had very intelligent people making some contributions last Wednesday or Thursday, I think Wednesday when that meeting was. And they realized that no provider is going to come in here unless they're going to be able to make it financially, whether or not the building is provided. So it's not just Medicare and Medicaid, which they absolutely have to be able to accept based on our community. They have to have private payers, like, employees provided health insurance, because that's what will make it financially feasible for them. And Code 3ER was a mistake from start to finish because they could not take Medicare and Medicaid.
And if I
And
could
that's what
add,
they were going to get. I mean, they
being
could
in
take them,
network.
but they couldn't get reimbursed.
being in network with private insurances, I think.
Right.
what's really
And one
critical.
of the gentlemen on the committee brought that up, that was tantamount to one of the conditions that they would have to sign an in-network agreement. So, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, we, part of our homework is to get the payer mix. So go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, which is the next slide. So there is still a provision in the RFP for a equipment use agreement. That's only if it is applicable, only if it's determined that it meets the requirements of the bond. And if that is in there, then it's a pass-through zero profit situation because it is grant associated. We are asking for a number of things. We're the regular startup budget, as well as the construction budget, and then some forecasts on their operations, including indigent care. And one of the things that the committee changed was they added that they want a 2-year forecast of payer mix and patient mix data. And that's part of what they're going to be evaluating, getting the baseline data from staff and then looking at what's being proposed by the various proposals to make sure that it's viable and that, all the boxes are checked in that regard. And then we also, of course, some of the other eligibility, they have to have had a license or previously possessed a valid license and or certification, depending on what kind of facility is proposed, as well as what y'all were just discussing, they added that all services have to be in network. Ultimately, when it's narrowed down to the very end on the proposers, we'll be asking for some detailed information about financial stability. And that's where Commissioner was talking about on the proprietary information, that certain things are protected, some are not, and that would be one that would be protected. And then also a clean record of operation. And the committee really emphasized that the clean record should not just be asking for the state of Texas. It needed to be nationwide for any kind of facility that, they're operating nationwide. It would also be a grant requirement too. We can't limit proposers coming from any specific geographic location.
Let me throw in a question here about the confidentiality limitations, because this is always a sensitive point for me. I completely understand that proposing industry participants will have proprietary information they don't want shared. What I think the public wants to see more than any of that is they want to get a look at the universe of possibilities we considered before we narrowed it down to one that it's a take it or leave it. What's the process for letting the public see who's given us a proposal and just generally what its outlines are.
Yeah, I think if there's
I'll
interest
take
in
that.
that, which, oh, okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll take that, Kim. Basically, all the proposals are open to, the public. However, the instructions say if you have confidential data that you do not want released, like say financial information or something, you have to stamp it confidential. And then if somebody says, well, look, I don't care if it's stamped confidential, I want to see it, then we would have to appeal to the state attorney general. And whatever the state attorney general says, whether it can be released or not, that's what we would do. So that's how the
Okay.
process.
So setting aside the proprietary information that's marked confidential, when can the commissioners and or the public see the proposals? When can we expect them to come in and be copied to us?
That you would have access to them when we present the recommendation to the committee. If you want to see all the proposals, that's fine with us.
And can I provide them to the public as well?
Well, we'll provide them to you
Wait,
guys, and if you, we'll get them out there somehow. I mean, the idea
Yeah,
is public, unless it's marked confidential, and there's a process to go through with that.
Okay, so my constituents can expect to see it when I see it, minus the confidential parts.
Correct.
And Kim, do you propose to, when you start getting these in, to give us all of them or only the ones that do you propose to have the committee narrow it down before we see it, or?
We
I'd
are
like to see 'em
asking them
all.
to narrow it down, but you can see the proposals after their ranking. We have to, wait till all the ranking is done,
So
and then,
even after you rank them, we be able to see all of them, even the ones that ranked below?
Yes,
Before the decisions are made.
yes. Mhm.
Awesome.
So maybe what I'm hearing from y'all is, William, do you see maybe there needs to be a touch point is kind of what I'm hearing, where after the first ranking happens, that we come back and make a report. Okay, we've done our first ranking. Here are the ones, that are going to receive interviews. And then as well as, you can see the information that was presented from the others that didn't make the recommended cutoff. Would that work, William, to have a touch point
Yes.
in between there?
Yes, that would work.
Yeah, I would think y'all can make a matrix that, of 35 things or 100 things or 5 things or whatever. Well, this is the reason why they were considered they met this, and this is the reason why they were not considered they met that. If you have a matrix that the committee, and I would think that the committee would have a responsibility to decide that, if you have a matrix that they're comfortable with, that it meets all the needs that have been expressed not only by Commissioners Court, but the citizens as a whole, or meets the majority of them, or whatever. Some of them I know are going to be negotiable. But if you say, well, we're a brand new company and we're just we want to see if we can do this, that's not what we want to see.
Right.
But I think you could give us an initial, whenever you get the proposals in and you open the proposals, you can take and study them and fill this matrix out, and then use that to rank the top 3 or whatever. And then we can go into detail on those based on the matrix.
Of course. And I'll say this, Jackie and the team, we always open our proposals publicly. Jackie has a great process. They're opened up, we kind of check them, and then there's a posting on the website that says, okay, we got 2 proposals or 5 proposals, or sometimes I think we've gotten as many as 25 proposals. Okay, so we open them. We have a screening sheet where we say, okay, did they include their insurances? Did they include their bond? Did they have their confidential statements listed? Do they have all different kind of criteria? That'll all be open publicly. It'll be listed on the sheet, and you can see that sheet because we'll post it on the website. But the actual proposals will need to go back to the committee for evaluation, and then you can see them when they're all through.
So we could do a touch point. So there's, as we've already outlined, it's a 2-stage process.
I don't know what a touch point is.
Come back.
Yeah.
We would come back. So the first, they would do their narrowing and make a recommendation on narrowing, and we could come back and touch base with the commissioner's court, make sure that you're in agreement. And then they would go back and do their interviews and then make their final recommendation, which always comes to y'all. So I would just be an interim step.
I will or will not be able to see the proposals themselves.
You can as soon,
You would be able to see them. What you will see at first is the sheet, showing who submitted, did we get 3 proposals, 17, 4, whatever. You'll see that. And then once it goes through the process and it comes back to you, then you'll be able to see everything unless it was marked confidential.
I guess what I'm asking is, may I please see the proposals when you received them, minus the confidential parts?
it has to be ranked by the committee first, and that's a federal requirement.
I think that's right.
Yeah, we need to let the committee do its thing, and then you'll be able to see it.
Yeah. It's not in the public realm until the committee has reviewed it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And independently blind scored it.
Right.
Then we can come back. That's the interim step that we could come back and make it all public. And I totally appreciate what everybody's saying about this, but keep in mind, put yourself, I'm XYZ hospital. And what the process, the more out there you get with it, the less people are going to propose, because companies don't like public, dealing with public entities. I mean, they just don't. That's an economic development. That's why economic development is a situation where you can go into executive session and talk about certain things about an economic development client, because you'd never get anybody here if everything was negotiated in public. And this is partially a negotiated event. I mean, we've got nothing with anybody until we select them, and they're not just coming to our door out from the blue. We're inviting it to come in, and we'll have significant negotiations, just like we do with an economic development prospect, to make sure that it reflects all the community values and what it is that you want to invest the federal dollars in.
So the document that I'm going to be able to see up front will at least identify who's proposing it and in general what kind of facility it is. It just won't be the entire proposal.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And it will also outline all the criteria that we screen them with when they come in. And again, the idea is to treat everyone fair and everyone the same.
So if you have some specific things that I've given you all a draft of the RFP. If there's some things that you think we're missing that need to be a bottom line screener, just a evaluation criteria that you can't step through the door unless you don't get past go, unless, let us know. And then we'll put that up on the front end, and it'll be part of that matrix. Matrix is a great idea. We do that on every proposal, but probably not to the level that the commissioner was describing, but we can certainly do that.
Well, I was saying a really high priority for me is urgent care. I mean, in other words, after hours, no appointment walk-in service. I don't know that we necessarily need to make that a hard and fast rule for every single person I don't want to disqualify somebody who doesn't include that. I do want to say whatever the rating system is should give that very high marks.
And we'll go over the rating system, and y'all can give some feedback on that and see if we've missed any kind of criteria right there as well. And that really is where the rubber meets the road. There's a
Kim,
wall.
I think a lot of these questions will be answered if you go forward, and then we can come back if we miss something.
Sure. But we can create a wall at the front that's appropriate, like you got to take Medicare, Medicaid. And then we can also incorporate it into the ranking criteria. When I'll skip to that real quick. There we go. So here are our current descriptors for what the committee will be evaluating. Looking at the quality of the proposal, there's requirements for a description of everything. There's the services and improvements that they're providing. Are they doing just the minimum? Are they providing more? Is it the type of services that we're looking for most? Because they'll have all the proposals in their hands, so they'll know what the community needs, and they'll heard from today's discussion what you're really looking for, and they can incorporate that into the evaluation. It does provide for additional points if it's an acute care hospital, because that's how we started this journey, was originally looking at wanting a hospital type facility. It looks at their history and experience and where they've operated in the past, what kind of services, the success of their facility we can look into. Of course, the financial strength. And then one of the things that the committee added, as Commissioner Russo was referencing, in-network plan, all of the plans and services need to be in network. And also they're going to be asked to list all of the health insurance plans that they accept. And then Medicare, Medicaid, and indigent care experience will be a factor. And then just we've got to have as a criteria what their timeline would be, because this project is time sensitive. There's only so long that we can get an extension for the project by the GLO. So that's a item. Now, the one at the bottom, we've received kind of mixed feedback about, which is no cost to the county, other than we've got that if they can apply for indigent care reimbursement. They have to meet all the state and county standards in order to do that. We'll have specific methods and means to do that in a contract that we signed. But we have to, according to the GLO, we have to incorporate a cost factor in the project that's required for all RFPs. And so that's why that's specifically in there. It's really clear throughout the RFP, this is all we've got. And anything up and above that, it either doesn't happen or the provider is paying for it. But this is something that they required in here that adds extra emphasis on the cost factor. And it's something that
So
the
we're
GLO is requiring.
seeing that as a hard and fast initial qualification, as well as we're just sort of going to underline it and put an exclamation point after it. You get marked off 100% if you don't meet this one. This one's a non-negotiable.
It is.
Yep, we're letting the process, it goes from the macro to the micro. So be patient. The process will vet out the right partner.
I mean, I'm just saying they shouldn't be getting in the door if they don't meet that one.
Right.
Correct.
You got it.
They can get through the door if they propose to pay for it themselves, but
Right,
just not
okay,
the county.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I guess, I don't know if this is the right page for it, but I would really urge one major criterion should be after hours, no appointment walk-in access.
Are we going to get away from the term micro hospital then? Somebody had said earlier.
That's what the committee is recommending. Yeah.
So
I
that's
think
confusing.
one of the things that it does is we started in our heads kind of thinking about a micro hospital in a specific way because of the A&M study, that it's a 2 to 8 bed. And, we started thinking in those terms. That's not the technical term for a micro hospital. And that's why they asked for us to change it. And they also felt like that was limiting. There are other types of acute care facilities that the committee said we should be looking at that might be excluded if you used the micro hospital term.
And yet we have a bond we're not eligible to issue unless it is a quote micro hospital unquote.
Right.
So we do have to consider it.
Yeah. And we just have to stick with what that legal definition is for the micro hospital. And so in the RFP, it's very clear. It talks about, when it's allowed to be used, and otherwise that it's not. Commissioner Russo, was there any other thoughts? We didn't talk in complete detail. I know one of the evaluators, Nancy Kinkler, was but everyone kind of chimed in on using that acute care hospital term.
Right. I think Jennifer Reset mentioned that a few times too.
Some of the requirements, I'm not going to read those to you, but things that we're looking at, asking, and it's really a two-tiered system for the submittal requirements. We kind of tried to set somewhat of a low bar to get through the door and to start having discussions and invitations to look at more detailed. But we don't want to, we'll probably leave this on the street for at least 4 weeks, but we want different entities to be interested and willing to put their foot in the door and have a conversation about what they want to do. So then the next step is when we get into more details, like the financial requirements and insurance requirements.
Kim, do you think 4 weeks is enough time? Because this is a very complicated issue.
It is probably.
It's typical
That's-
that we
We
go
don't want-
40, it's typical that we go 45 days. If you want us to go longer, we could consider adding a week.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know that we necessarily need to, but I'm just saying this is an awfully complicated issue. And I know that for every submittal that RFP that you're going to get, you're going to have a ton of questions that they're going to be asking, and you're going to have to research and everything. 4 weeks is not very much time.
Right.
Is it going to mess up your schedule if you go to 45?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is
I'd rather have
4
45.
weeks hard fast thing. Is it a hard fast?
It is not.
Okay.
And in fact, that was one of the items that we hadn't gotten to talk to the committee specifically about, how long they thought we should keep it on the street in order to meet, the criteria that we're
I would
first
think that that's
asking
something
for.
we need to look at pretty quick.
I mean, and yes, it does impact our schedule, but not severely, if we add another
I'd
couple of
rather
weeks
take
or
a
so.
little bit more time and make a good decision than be rushed and make a decision that's not quite as good.
And we'll have a lot of follow-up, making sure that
Sure.
a lot of vendors even get to that it goes to the right people. I mean, if you talk about some of these organizations, it's kind of hard to get together a really good vendor list and know that, it's gotten to the exact person's desk that it needs to be. So we'll do the regular process, but then we'll have follow-up calls, making sure that it's gone through their system and gone to the right place.
Kim, I would just point out on that timeline that was in our packet, it does show 5 weeks RFP from advertisement to proposal deadline. So that's a little bit longer than 4 weeks already planned in, still to meet the timeline that you have that will hopefully keep us in line with the other steps that need to be taken farther down the road.
And, one of the problems is all the other steps are kind of reliant on knowing
Right.
who and what you're working with. And we really want the operator on board before we have any significant discussions about, obviously, the design. We'll start in mid-section. If you look at the overall schedule, we'll start putting out an RFP for the design committee in between, but we're not going to have any official movement or anything on it until we've got somebody on board, because it's so highly dependent. And then also, as y'all are aware, the environmental process takes a very long time. So we'll have to start that process to the extent that we can. But we don't know how big of a facility it's going to be. If it's an urgent care, that's a pretty small footprint. If it's some form of acute care hospital, then we're talking about using up all the real estate that's made available for the project. So we have to deal with that with the environmental process as well.
Yeah, not to get too much into the weeds, but there will be 2 additional processes going on all at the same time being conducted by the team. One, as Kim says, is to get the architect on board so that when we do have the right proposal and, we go forward to build something, that we have an expert that can execute the plan. And then obviously we have to get it clear for environmental before we use federal funds. So those processes will be going on at the same time that we are identifying the operator.
Yeah, and that brings, I don't mean to be minutia here, but it brings up a point. Whenever we did the code 3 we used their design and as much as we could. I don't think we had a separate architect for that. But whenever we do something like this, I think we need to control the architect, not the submittal, people submitting.
We
That's
will.
part of the MOU. We do that and it's part of the, be paid for by the grant fund. So we will.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll oversee all the bidding, the construction, everything. We do want them at the table if they have specific requirements. We want to build something that's going to work for them, but they're, a third party to the table, not the lead at all.
And as we're looking at that same property, everything, Aransas County Medical Services is going to be involved every step.
Yes. And the committee we've had discussions with them on who should be on the committee, and that the committee that was presented to you is reflective of their input.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on the operating agreement, don't want to go too much into this, but at a high level, we could end up getting two proposals that meet within our budget. So the committee it could be more than one operator that's proposing out there if the available funds cover it. If it's a facility, let's say two small facilities like urgent care and the rural clinic is a good example of something that could be combined or could be with two different operators. So it leaves it open for the discretion for the Commissioners Court to make that final decision. One thing that's overriding, and I've mentioned it before, is that the county and ACMSI, can't make profit. If there's profit made, then the GLO it kicks in where you have to send that profit to the state and ultimately the federal government again.
So the provider can be for profit, but the county cannot be sharing in the profit.
Correct.
Right.
But we can pay ourselves for expenses incurred. And here's an example, a list of items that are necessary in order to oversee, a development. And this would be something that ACMSI could charge for, any of the property insurance, capital replacement fund, different things like that, to make sure that it's a viable and ongoing facility.
Let me ask Jackie something. Jackie, whenever we do this, is it going to require, from the county's aspect, to make sure that everything's going, is it going to require someone extra in your office to help keep up with that? Because I know the auditor's office is going to be very involved in this.
Yes, sir. And we are very stretched right now. It could very possibly require.
So is that an expense that could be put in here?
So it is. Most of it, the idea is to sign a contract with ACMSI where they're overseeing and collecting and doing all the management. That's one of the benefits of working with them. They've done that before. They have a resume for doing that. So I would say one of the main ways that the county could potentially be involved is through the Indigent Care Fund and administration of those funds and making sure that it meets all the, contract requirements.
Yeah, anything that we are in contract with people with, the auditor's office is involved in. And
correct. And I would agree with that, Jack. And I would just think of it like this. You have ongoing operations with the airport. Okay, so ACMSI, they will kind of get into all the details and provide reports to your auditor's office and the judge and whoever they're directed to the county. So it may or may not require extra assistance, and that's an administrative charge that could be passed through if it is.
And we can,
because I know the auditor's office is stressed right now.
We can incorporate that into the contract, the final contract with ACMSI.
Yeah. Okay. That we need to do that.
And it's eligible. Okay, we're looking at potentially a minimum 20-year term. There that could slide a little bit, but looking for a longer term because there are, grant commitments that we have to make. We've had some discussion with GLO about change of use and what happens. And as long as it's it's eligible for use of CDBG, it's not a problem. So if the facility ultimately needs to change out to some other type of medical facility or some other use that is still an eligible CDBG activity, then we're fine. But we do want to try to go into a fairly long-term relationship that shows commitment.
And fine means no clawback, which is another thing I get questions about. Talk to us just briefly about what happens if the facility we work with fails and we aren't able to come up with an alternative qualifying use.
Yeah,
Worst case scenario, we have to sell the building or what happens?
We sell it and give the money back to the state, and which ultimately goes back to the feds.
You will have an asset to work with. It's, it's scary in one way, but then again, you're covered, but if you manage it correctly.
Yeah. Now, in our discussions, they gave us more latitude than I would have expected. So, for instance, they gave us an example that if it was a job training facility, they just came up with that out of the blue. That's an eligible CDBG activity.
Oh, not just an eligible medical one, just any eligible CDBG. Okay.
And that it serves the population that we represented in the application. So no assignment of the contract, but as y'all know, different types of medical facilities have all kinds of subcontracts that they're dealing with, and that's allowed. But the full responsibility still presides with the awarded proposer. And then it also provides for the possibility for a subsidy of indigent care funds for indigent care and operational deficits associated with that. Originally, there was months and months ago a calculation made that up to $1.2 million per year might be available for that purpose.
Now, are you talking about in that instance, just turning the money over to them, or they have to qualify the people and?
They have to qualify everything. Yeah, and the RFP is very specific.
And it's not
no, it's not a blank check. They have to qualify it, and it has to meet the criteria of the state and the county.
Every individual expense has to qualify.
Yeah. Kim, one more question. Has the committee considered, or is it appropriate in this to maybe pick up some extra funds for operation by making it a training center for LVNs or RNs or medics or any number of things where they can work within the facility and get CDBG funds to help pay for that, to help relieve the overall burden on the facility?
We have not, we originally did talk about that, especially when we were at the other site at Little Bay, because there was some additional space that was available. We haven't recently spoken about it, but I can certainly.
Well, I would think that, we're the county, at least the Commissioner's Court, is very much interested in with the thing at Little Bay, the job center, that this would be if we go in saying that, we'd like to, at least for the operator to consider maybe training 3 professionals in training within their facility and utilizing them and getting CDBG funds to pay it. Anyway, it's just something that long-term it fits in with the overall goals of the Commissioner's Court, I think.
Could I add something to that, please? The FQHC does have provisions that encourage
The what now? Yeah.
federally qualified health center. If that ends up being what's selected, I don't know what's going to be selected, depends on the proposals, but they do encourage residents of different disciplines to come to those facilities and practice, which offsets student loans. And that's an attraction. Patricia Arnold explained that to me. Also, some physician offices, like where my husband works in Portland, encourages the providers to take in students who need clinical hours. So that would be just a regular occurrence that might take place at any of, if it's some sort of a healthcare provider's office or something of that nature.
Yeah, Jack, I think you've hit on something that's important. We do foresee down the road, once everything shakes out, potential partnerships with the training center. And we're excited that if we can get this thing to move, I think we can open the doors up to different options.
Awesome.
I also mentioned earlier in the discussion, there are a number of things, information that the committee has asked for that they need and they believe that the proposers will need in order to be responsive. So there's a list right there that staff will be working on. We have an inventory of services and locations. However, that hasn't been updated in some time. So we'll get a full inventory there. And by the way, originally in the study, it said that we were up short about 5 general practitioners in the area. So we could literally double what we have right now in order to meet what's typically an appropriate level of care physicians. And so we'll take a look at that and get an update, and we'll also have some conversations to see what everybody that's here, what their long-term plan is as far as staying and operating. Some demographic data, as well as any kind of statistics we can get on Medicare, Medicaid, and indigent care. And then interesting, they also said the profile of those that are in the long-term care facilities, the nursing facilities, that they'd like to see that because that impacts some of the demand. So next steps. So we have met with the GLO to discuss the market changes, that we want to open it up and have it for a medical facility and proposed use of the funds. We've submitted the information that the GLO has requested. There's a couple of outstanding items that that are trickling in, but for the most part, we've turned everything in, including this RFP and the MOU. We have the committee in place, and they've given some initial feedback. We'll have another meeting to get some additional information for them. The next step is to get authorization from y'all to go ahead and proceed with the RFP, subject to final input from the committee. I don't believe that we're going to get any additional information from the GLO. They've given us their responses, and that has been incorporated. So I don't think we're going to get anything else at this time. And then after that, there's other steps in the overall schedule that we have that I'll need to go back after getting this feedback and the final feedback from the committee and ACMSI. We'll go ahead and finish out the RFP with the details. We'll go ahead and issue the RFP, and then in the middle of the process, we'll issue the RFP for a design team, so that when we get through with our RFP process in securing an operator, that they'll be ready to sit down and talk about the design. And we're also going to need to go ahead and start the environmental. So we have to walk and chew gum at the same time on several pieces in order to meet the timeline.
When do you expect to finalize the RFP?
We're anticipating within the next week to get something from ACMSI. We anticipate having one final meeting with the RFP committee before we start putting together the packet to send it out.
So you won't expect, I guess I'm asking, will it be before our next regularly scheduled meeting?
About the same time.
Because I would feel a lot more comfortable approving a final RFP than an RFP that's going to be changed in some point after we let go of it today.
Well, we're not asking you to, for the specific wording, we're just asking for permission to proceed with the RFP, knowing that there's some moving parts we have to take into account.
I know that's what worries me. I need to know that before it gets finalized, I get to see it one more time and have an up or down. It makes me
The
nervous
RFP
to
has
approve
been-
documents that aren't final, is what I'm
Understood.
saying.
The RFP has been in what you see is substantial. What we could do is go ahead and have the meetings this week and then put it back on the 22nd with the final draft. It's in red line. Everything I do is in red line. So we have tracking that we can easily go back and see what changed. So it wouldn't be that much for you to review it again because it'll be real clear what we changed.
It's not going to
so-
change substantially.
And it should be no problem to give it its final approval next Monday.
Well, we can try. Again, we have some research to do. And
Or the meeting after that. I mean, I'm not trying to rush you. I'm trying to say when it's ready, I would like a chance to vote on it when it's final.
I think we could put it back on the 22nd, which is your next meeting, and go ahead and schedule the committee to meet one more time. Like I said, it takes me 30 minutes to update it because it's not that much. The only thing I would be concerned about is I don't know if they want any changes after getting this information or not. This list, I'm not going to have that information, ready that quick. I mean, it's going to take some research to find that information.
Well, I mean, what information you really have to find? I mean, you send us a draft of the request for proposal. Okay. I would assume that whenever you sent this, you would have put in everything that you could think of to go in there. What has changed?
The only thing that's changed is what I've been going over in the presentation. I was really clear after I did a copy of the presentation and we sent it out. Then we had our our evaluation committee, and everything that I specifically went over and is highlighted in yellow, those are the changes. It would only be if they had any other changes. And I can tell you what level. I mean, when we're talking to the committee, we're not asking for nits. We can't ask for nits because most of the RFP has a lot to do with what the federal requirements are, in process and that type of thing. So we were asking for the 30,000 foot level, like what should we be doing with the uses? Is there anything in the list of deliverables in that first phase of deliverables that's proprietary that somebody's going to look at it and say, I've got to give you that to get through the door just to talk? No, I'm out. So we wanted to make sure that we set the right level. And that's one of the questions that I asked the committee. Are we asking for the right information at the right time to maximize those coming in, but also getting the information later on in the process so that you can make a good evaluation of who's proposed?
Kim, I would recommend if you can't have it by Monday, we just schedule a special meeting
Yeah.
to approve it when it is.
We can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's something this important, a special meeting that highlights just this is really.
We'd be happy to do that.
apropos, yeah. Okay.
Sounds
Okay, go
good.
ahead. Go ahead, Ken.
Also, just want to mention one last thing. The architect and environmental, those funds are within the grant. So there won't be any expense to the county, just so you know that.
Just one quick question. We've talked about environmental, and it takes so long. What do we really look at in environmental? I mean, is that a broad term, or is that like we're gonna look, see what's in the dirt?
Well, they do, we turn in initial environmental information and then they
Such
make a
as?
determination.
Just give me an example.
Whether there's an oil tank that used to be there
Yeah,
because it was a gas
they do
station.
historical
Gas station.
research,
What did
like,
what did the one on the Little Bay entail? John, did you deal with?
Well,
There was an
I-
oil
I
tanker
was-
that
I
had been
did
across
the
the street that they were worried about.
Yeah, there, nothing came up on that at all. There was nothing that came out on the environmental, but we did do a phase 1 and phase 2. It was paid for by the property owner, not by the county. If you'll recall, we got him to do a donation. So, but we did that because you can kill three
How long
to
was the
4
process?
months just
How long was the
for,
process in doing that one?
Several months.
it's usually 3 to 4 months for the, well, we can have about 6 to 7 weeks on the bid, and then they need 3 to 4 months to do the proposal. And then GLO processes it
It's
for
mostly-
months.
We have to satisfy them and their staff.
Right. Now, in that particular case, because we turned it in, that has turned out very favorable for us. When we got the award, and we've spoken with the project manager, they are indicating there's no other environmental steps other than we have to package the asbestos information up a little bit better to get that. But they haven't required us to go through a lot of the steps. We anticipate in this one, because it's a different agency and they have a different viewpoint, that's why you'll see when you look at the overall schedule, it's months and months, but probably 7 months, would you say? I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I don't have the
It's
schedule in front of
it's
me.
6 to 7 months, unfortunately, and that's a process we don't control. We provide the information very timely. We know exactly what to do to get it to them, but we don't control when they sign off.
And I'll give you an example. We just have done an environmental for the downtown parking lot. Nothing of any consequence came up in that particular environmental package, but it's going over the estimated time frame already. And we were calling, but it's just, it takes them quite some time to do their review.
Surprising they didn't find anything there to me.
It's more involved. They go back to title and they notify all the Native American tribes. And they ask the tribes to come back and say whether they have burial grounds or anything on that property. It's just a process.
There's
Well, I'm
a
not
30,
talking about that. I'm talking about environmental stuff like chemicals and stuff
Oh,
that
yeah.
might have been used in the last 150 years on that railroad site.
but there's other things too. There's 30-day notices to certain agencies like U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They have that long, and then there's postings in the newspaper. It's substantial process.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Right. So my takeaway, I've taken the notes about some of your priorities, and we'll incorporate that into the process. Some of the things that I've heard is we need to have some emphasis incorporated for facilities that provide after hours care. We'll put together a matrix on the front end for us to fill out for some of the main points. After the first round is conducted and the committee has recommendations on narrowing the group, we'll come back to the commissioners court and have a discussion. And we'll also put something in there to talk about training center opportunities as well.
Kim, I think also, before we get too far into this, we really need to have someone come, maybe the committee perhaps would come and tell us what we're really looking at. The face of this is the same, but it's changed coming, to and kind of swayed to and fro. I mean, my idea of what we're trying to do is we're trying to get an urgent care facility here where you can take care of somebody that has a problem for at least a couple of days. Has a bona fide medical problem for at least a couple of days until they can get in to see, I think, somebody that is having a coronary, or somebody that is having a problem with diabetes, or somebody that has had an abdominal wound or something where we can, my idea of the emergency room is, my idea of this is something that goes beyond what the emergency room is, but maybe can't be transported. That, to me, that's what acute care means, is that, it's something that you got to take care of right now. Everything. And I don't have a clear view of what it is that ultimately it's kind of become convoluted. So can you just, I'm not talking about today because we've taken a long time, but can y'all come back and just tell us what the footprint's going to look like and what the services y'all anticipate will be there and what was originally talked about that's not there and what was originally not talked about is there?
I think what we could do is get one of the committee members, and there's several that could do this, talk about the gaps in the market from their analysis and perspective, and then also to talk about some of the hurdles
That's
for
all
the
well and good.
different.
But what's it going to look like? I mean, what is that going to provide to the person that lives at 210 Myrtle Lane, Aransas County?
Jack, we have to go through the process to.
William, I
Yeah.
understand that. I understand
We
that.
got To trust the
But-
process because it's federal money.
But I understand that. And I understand y'all are doing everything that you need to do. But I am confused. It may only be me, but I'm confused at what it is we're really trying to accomplish here. Because the goal, which is one sentence, provide health care beyond the emergency room, but less than a certain amount of time. You know, whether it's a bed, whether it's just having additional physicians, as Commissioner Laubach said, additional facilities and physicians at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we're not looking to do a full-blown hospital. We're not looking to do, you know, I don't know, cancer care here. We're not looking to be medical center hospital, but what is it that we're really trying to do with this money? And what is it we're really trying to do from this court to go forward to provide what we can within the confines of the finances that we have and the facilities that we have or will have? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Because I want the person that lives at 2000 whatever to know that if they have a child that's choking, or that if they have a child that has asthma and is having an asthma attack, they can take them to the emergency room. The emergency room takes care of it and then sends them over to the acute hospital. I mean, to me, that's what's important. I don't want to have to. We have 24/7 is doing a great job. They really are. But they are emergency where you can't live long enough to go to Corpus. But then we have other people that are sick, and especially on weekends or whatever, and we have to stabilize them before we can take them, or they can go to their doctor or whatever. Especially the elderly, and one of these days I'm going to be elderly. You know, not today, but one of these days, and you know, and I fall and break a hip or something like that. And I just can't be taken immediately, thrown in my pickup and taken to, you know, to somewhere to be taken care of. What is it that we're really looking for? That's what I'm having a problem with. I appreciate what you guys are doing more than you know. I really appreciate the amount of steps that y'all have gone through. And I realize this is a unique opportunity, but what are we getting?
Jack, out of the interest of time and
Yes.
everything, I believe that question needs to be answered in more detail and cannot be done right now.
That's
So we'll
right.
get it to you or get it to everybody as soon as possible. All right. Anything else? That's your presentation.
That's what we've got. So our game plan will be, we're going to do what we always do, work real hard this week and see how far we can, you know, move the RFP along and getting some of the final input and addressing Mule's concerns. And our goal would be to bring it back next week. And we'll do the best that we can to get that information to you as early as possible. We respect that, but we got a short time frame.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, William. Items for deliberation and or discussion. Item 1, do I have a motion?
Do you want a motion to table that?
Gonna bring it back, other than the table?
Just a presentation.
Right, but I mean,
There's no action on a presentation.
right, but for item number 1, can we have a motion to just table that item, or do you want us to handle the motion, Jennifer?
I think need to handle the motion.
Do you think you really need to be authorized to prepare it?
This
Uh,
is,
You already have authorization to
Linda,
just
you-
continue to next meeting.
The authorization would be for the issuance of the RFP, not to prepare it. So the preparation's already underway. Due to Commissioner Laubach's request, I think that the team was planning to bring it back next week. So if you want a table, that would probably make the most sense. And then we'll put this exact item on for the next meeting for you to authorize the
All right, do I have a
issue.
Okay, so then I move to table.
Motion made, seconded, Commissioner Laubach. All those in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me, I didn't do roll call, but I think I got unanimous. All right, item number 2.
I move to approve amendment number 3 to the Grant Works, Inc. Grant Administration Contract, incorporating the medical facility project and associated administrative services into the existing contract and adding $444,765 in administrative fees per GLO contract number 20-065-098 C270 Community Block Grant Disaster Recovery.
okay, I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded, Commissioner Cheney.
I have a question.
Okay,
Okay, how did we miss $444,000?
We didn't.
And is that coming out of the,
Because we're adding this micro
Comes out of the-
hospital task to the main contract. Is that what we're doing?
Yes, the original contract that we had was approximately $43 million that was primarily drainage fiber optic. This fee for the medical facility was not incorporated because it came in as a separate contract. And we've been project development and wanted to make sure that it was going forward before we
It is
amended this.
prescribed- The percentage is prescribed in the grant.
It is,
okay,
yes.
good.
roll call. No other questions. Roll call.
Aye,
Aye.
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 Aye, it's unanimous. Yes. Item number 3. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve accepting a 24-foot wide drainage
20
easement.
foot wide, Jack.
I'm sorry.
You
20.
said 24 foot.
Oh, yeah, 20 foot. I'm sorry. 20 foot wide. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Cashline. Granted by Oyster Land LLC, embracing 0.105 acres of land out of a 2.830 acre tract out of section 74, 6th subdivision of the Taft Farm Lands, Aransas County, Texas, according to the plat recorded in volume 1, page 50 of the plat records of Aransas County.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded, Commissioner Castleline.
If,
Discussion.
yeah, I just want to ask a question. I mean, I understand this to be somebody's giving us for free a drainage easement. It will help in the nearby drainage project. It's not costing us anything. Helps with drainage. Is that pretty much it?
And where is it?
This is the end of Copano Retreat Road on the east side of the kayak launch.
Okay, okay.
And for what purpose has this been an area that floods frequently?
Well, this is an outfall to the bay. Anytime we can get an outfall to the bay, we'll try to get it. It was kind of
And the
opportunistic.
construction of the kayak site and park may have impaired the drainage.
May or may not have.
All right. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Aye,
Aye.
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 Aye. Unanimous. Item number 4. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve master agreement for mutual aid in between the county, or between the council, Bend Council of Governments, the COG, and Aransas County.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Castleline. Do I have any discussion?
I just would point out that we didn't get all the pages of that master agreement. We received the odd number pages, but not the even numbered pages. which hopefully there's nothing serious on those pages.
I got mine,
Our paper copies are both sided, but
both sides.
Really?
the,
Mine is double-sided, but it's pages 1, 3, 5, and 7.
Sure is, isn't it?
yeah, sure is.
So I just had a couple of questions. In this responsibility for response costs, a responding party is authorized to request reimbursement from the requesting party for reasonable costs incurred pursuant to this agreement in furnishing disaster assistance. We have no idea what that might be though, right? So there's no way to really budget for that. If we provide assistance to someone and it costs us additional for sheriff's deputies or environmental services or fire department, we may get reimbursed back, but we may not.
That's true.
Am I reading that correctly?
That's true.
Can we table this one until we get the even numbered pages? I mean, it's not a time sensitive item, is it?
I don't believe so.
If it's not time sensitive, I'd prefer that we tabled and just took it up next Monday.
The motion was to approve. So if you would like to make a
Make
different
sub-motion.
motion, we'll need to take a vote on the original motion.
Yeah.
And then make a new motion to table.
Can we not move to table before we vote on the original motion?
I would probably vote on the original motion and then
No.
move to table.
Go on the sub-motion first, because that is addition to the original motion. I don't mean to argue with you, but that's.
Yeah.
No, you can do whatever way you prefer.
Well, then I move to table.
I'll second that.
Motion made, seconded Commissioner Castro, or Commissioner Cheney. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Yeah, I got the roll call again. Unanimous. Item number 5. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve a 5% salary increase for the detention center employees only as prescribed by the auditor's office, and take up the rest of the possible salary increases at budget time.
I will second that.
Motion made and seconded Commissioner Cheney. Any discussion? Here.
Apologize, I hadn't read the revised agenda. Committee met last Thursday and we did come up with 4 proposals, and I guess they're in your packet as well.
Yeah.
But what we didn't discuss in court last week that the committee did hear that's not in that motion is that since that time, I've got 2 nurses that are leaving in the next month. One's taking retirement. The other is just leaving because she didn't want the pressure of, she said, if Cindy leaves, I'm resigning too. So she submitted a resignation. I've got a sergeant this morning that's interviewing for a CPS job in Kingsville, and every expectation is that she's going to have a job offer there. So while last week I told you we had 7 vacancies and 1 in quarantine, we did hire 1, but we're losing 3 more in the next 3 weeks probably. So it's a matter that's going forward. Now, I've told you I don't know what the number is. Did talk to the committee. Everybody I think is in attendance that was in the committee meeting last Thursday. Left the meeting thinking we were looking at 10% for the jailers, and the discussion is about what was going to happen to the rest. Told them we could start at that because there was some discussion. They didn't know if that was enough. Since that time, I did find out Calhoun County, who is on the coast, who does have probably a real estate market comparable to ours, but the big distinction is that they've got a lot of industry. Starting jailer there is making $22.85 an hour.
Sheriff Mills, what do you think you need to stabilize your department?
I've got to get the jailers to a position where it's attractive. When you
I
look
mean,
at
numbers, dollars, percentages, what do you need?
10% is
10% brings us to about equal to the others at about 20, I think. And I actually suggested the 5 because at the meeting you said something about starting there, and you really didn't know what a start point was.
well, you had the discussion last Thursday, if I recall, was that you didn't think 10% was going to draw the attention.
I didn't.
And I didn't-
I really don't, but I kind of fell back over the weekend that you said.
Well,
that.
my comment in reply was that we could start at 10. And if that doesn't draw applications in some deadline of 2 months and we're not filling these jobs, we needed to come back and maybe bump it. But I didn't want to jump out. 15% would put them above my starting deputy. While there's nothing in the legislature says you can't, I think it would create a real bad environment in that there's a distinction. The state of Texas recognizes at 18 years of age, I can hire somebody out of school who's not as mature and put them in a controlled, safe environment of a jail where we're driven by policies and procedures. And if they're going to make more money than somebody that I put in a car with an oath of office and tell him to go put cuffs on somebody in the middle of the night and God knows where, that's a problem. And so I didn't want to get in a position where the jailers were making more than the deputies.
What are you recommending as a solution? I think I understand what you're saying the problem is. I just need to know, what are you recommending as the solution?
I think it's going to be a joint deal that if we do go and decide we're going to go 10% for the jailers to try to make that attractive, and that takes $1.80 something cents. I think it would take them to $20.15. Puts you above San Patricio, puts you above Refugio. But I think we've got to look at the deputies as well at some level.
Proposing 10% for jailers and 10% for deputies?
I am proposing 10% for jailers and 10% for the sheriff's department.
I might propose it as well, but I need to hear from the head of the department whether that's what he's recommending.
That would be a comparable bump and keep the salaries separated. And that would be my first choice. Yes, we do the same for both.
Okay.
If we do 10 and 5, that puts us pretty close border in the discussion with Commissioner Castleline.
I know, I'm not trying to
If we
put you
go
on the
10 and
spot. I'm
5.
just trying to get you to be clear what you're recommending. You're recommending 10 and 10.
The difference of the 10 and the 5 of the jail.
Well, 10 for the jail, 5 for the deputies, the salaries.
And 5 for deputies is going to be 302.
Well,
That's what we said last week.
Yeah, and that's on a 27 pay period rather than 26.
I mean, the number we came up with was very close to 300,000 when we discussed it last week for 10% for both jailers and deputies.
Correct. It was a little over 300,000.
And how much did you say the jail returned to the county budget last year? Was it
The jail
2
alone
million?
returned over 500,000. The sheriff's office and license and weight total was $630,000, I think, that we went back to the general fund with.
I
between the
guess
two.
I may have misheard. Maybe when you said something about $1 million or 2 million. You may have been aggregating years.
Oh, yes, we've had years, like I said, in any given year prior, we've returned enough money to have funded the jail increase easily. Now,
But the $1 or $2 million number, did I just hear that wrong, or was that?
there have been years.
There have been years when
we
you
did.
But last year you think was about 600,000?
630, 640, I believe is what the number was when I looked at.
Money from another place.
And to be clear, what we're talking about is this would have to come out of the general fund because we don't have any other magic place to take it from. So the proposal is 10% for jailers, 10% for deputies, cost about 300,000, and it has to come out of the general fund. And I think that's what I heard
That would,
Commissioner Rousseau
I don't think
move
you
for.
have a calculation of 10 and 10. I don't remember us ever hearing a number for 10 and 10.
It was like 291, I think you said last.
I did a calculation.
I think that's
for,
10 and 5.
10% of jail with 5% of sheriff's deputies. And then also the next scenario would be just a 10% for jail only.
We didn't do one for the sheriff's office.
So would you just have
Yeah,
to-
10 and 5 is 302 plus.
Correct.
Oh, so we don't have a number for 10 and 10. We just have a number for 10 and 5.
No, ma'am.
Well, you just add
Or
this
just-
and this.
it's
So
a
you're
step,
looking
yeah.
at probably close to
Well, 5 is
350,000
$73,000.
somewhere.
So I'm sorry, say again, 10 and 10 is what?
Well, 5
Probably
is-
about, probably a little bit more than that.
yeah,
Three,
46,000.
probably about 360, 370.
370, actually, it's 370,000.
That's for
That's
both.
10 on each, yes.
Okay, so a motion is on the floor for 10 and 10, cost about 370, and it would come out of the general fund.
Motion on the floor.
Your motion on the
No,
floor is
that's
for
not-
5%.
5.
Was that,
5%
did you say
jail.
5 and 5? Pat?
No, it's what Commissioner
Motion
Casterly
by
said.
second.
Because that was my understanding what the sheriff was talking about in our meeting.
I was just talking about, an additional bump if 10 didn't move it
We
because
talked-
when you express it, a concern that 10% wouldn't draw the attention
No.
on an applicant because it's,
I think
I don't mind amending mine to 10 for the jail people, and that will put them about what deputies are, but I'm not in favor of giving 10 to patrol.
nor even 5. So the two motions that we've heard discussed are 10 and 0 versus 10 and 10.
two motions for 5 and 10 and
There's one motion.
And 0.
The motion that I made is for 5 for jailers to be looked at budget time. I don't mind amending that to changing that to 10.
Okay, so after amendment, it would be 10 and 0.
Yeah.
And what
let's-
Commissioner Rousseau proposed was
10% for both the sheriff's
10 and 10.
deputies and for the jailers, because I think you will lose deputies if you bring the jailers up to what the deputies are making and you don't give some incentive to
And
the deputies.
Would that technically be a motion? That would be a motion to amend Commissioner Casterline's motion.
Well, let me, I want to withdraw my second. I think we need to deal with these as 2 separate items because they're 2 separate departments. Let's deal first of all with the jail. What do we want to do with the jail?
He just made motion 10%.
10%. I'll second that motion.
Motion made and seconded on
Wait, can we have
Detention.
discussion about that?
Detention only.
We only have one agenda item listed.
that's true.
Yeah, but
So we
but-
need to make our motion
Okay.
in one item.
Let me just say, there's nobody here that enjoys the law enforcement. I think they're doing a great job, but if we give 10% to both departments, that's going to open up every department to the fact that every department has people in it that deserve a raise of some sort. So
But this isn't
just bringing that up.
about what people deserve. It's about solving a problem with a bleeding of a
We
task
might
force.
have a problem if we do.
But we have an actual one now.
We only have a problem in the jail.
Right.
We're
If
But
those
we
other
can
departments
create a
are losing
problem with
staff,
the sheriff's
we only-
deputies.
We're going to create a lot of problems, but we only have a problem in the jail right now.
All
right, other departments that end up losing staff are always free to come to us and tell us that that's happening, but the jail is the only one that's telling us that today.
Okay.
May I
But-
say something
but
else?
Budget time is a more appropriate time to deal with other than emergency situations. And
This
I-
is to solve an overtime problem.
correct. Right now, like I said, last week, we expended $22,000 in January in overtime.
Do you see an emergency problem with giving 10% to the jailers now and not immediately addressing the deputies, instead waiting until budget process this summer?
It's not an emergency, but we're going to find out real quick
Hmm.
how they feel, I think.
So you may
Well,
have to come back to us.
Well, it's, you're only 3 months out from the time that we're going to actually start preparing budgets anyway. I'll
So-
grant that right now, but it's,
So that sounds
Uh,
like an argument for starting with the jailers and seeing what happens with everything else, either immediately if it's an emergency or in the summer if it's not.
But I would remind everyone that last summer, when this court minus me was discussing the budget, Sheriff Mills came and asked for consideration to give an increase above and beyond what the rest of the county was to receive to the jailers and to the sheriff's deputies. And that was not acted upon.
Right, but I mean, that's because we considered it and decided that the facts didn't argue for it, but now the facts have changed, but only some of them have. What we have in our possession right now is facts showing that we've got an emergency with the jailing staff. We can't establish an emergency with the deputy staff. We may be able to in 2 weeks, in which case we should think about it again. But for now, what we should do is solve the emergency and keep our ears open for another emergency and otherwise handle it in the regular budget process.
And the 10%, I don't believe, if I remember the numbers right, will put the jailers in about the same rate as
it will put them in the same rate.
And what's
Not about,
the-
it'll
what's
put them
the-
in the same rate.
What's the aggregate dollar cost for only 10% only jailers?
10% only jailers.
Is 228,304.
Okay, so we would be talking about taking slightly less than $230,000 out of the general fund to give an immediate 10% bump to jailers only
And we're
to
really
address
not-
this emergency.
We're really not taking it out of the general fund because of the fact that we've already spent more than that in the first 3 months or near that in the first 3 months of the year in overtime. What we're talking about is reducing
Stopping the
overtime
bleeding.
and paying it back in salary.
Then I just need a number for that. What's the net?
Well, it's.
Because I call it 230 unless I hear a definite number that's net.
We'll have that money in his budget
Yeah.
already.
Do you?
We're gonna,
He has a history of giving,
Net of,
having some excess.
I think say it, on
I
a
don't know
run
what
rate
the
for the
number
year,
is.
we're looking at $240,000 if we don't correct it this year
Right.
in
That's
overtime.
what I'm saying.
there are a lot of ways to calculate this number and I'm not the one that can do it. Somebody just needs to tell me what's somebody's best estimate of what this costs us so that we know what we're hitting the general fund with.
What salary and burdens for the year in the jail now? Salary and burdens.
To start in the jail currently.
Current year.
I would like
No,
to,
budget. I'm talking about budget.
she's looking at budget numbers, but while she's looking at that, I gave you an analysis of what the jail has been traditionally giving back for the last 10 years. Of that 500,000 last year, we looked at it, it was probably about 170,000 of it was salaries, not counting the burdens because of attrition.
Just of
and stuff.
attrition, vacancies. Yes, sir.
So they traditionally do have money in there that would cover a lot of that.
And
just
Jackie,
because
did
of
you,
that.
am I right that was last year or this year that CARES Act has actually paid a lot of their expenses? So that's some of the surplus.
Last year, it would be in 2020, so, but it was more of the building stuff.
Building.
It wasn't salaries.
Building
But they
facilities.
did-
Yes, sir. We've
did cover
upgraded
some of the
a lot of
upgrades
air
and stuff.
conditioning for negative pressure. We spent money on that and the studies as well.
But there weren't any of the bills that you were going to pay anyway that were
No,
paid.
sir.
that
No, sir.
would-
No,
which
sir.
would
Anything
create
that
a
was
surplus?
budgeted
wasn't
could
budgeted.
not be used for that if it was already in the budget.
Okay, here's how I'm looking at it. The amount that the jail,
3 million, so take 10% of 3 million, that's $300,000.
Mhm.
It's gonna make it
the
300,000.
amount that the jail gives back to the county each budget period is an argument for, being cooperative with the sheriff's department when he asks for a raise. Is not the same as what are we doing to the budget if we make a change in midstream to salaries. I need a number. I'm willing to accept 230,000 as the number. It could be net of something. Somebody may be able to establish that it costs us far less than 230,000 because we're going to save overtime and so forth.
Is this
But-
in your packet or?
Yes, but I can't take that chart and get a
Oh.
number. So somebody needs to net it out for me. What are we actually talking about doing to the budget by making this change to give people a 10% bump?
If we started January the 1st, if we had done, it would have increased his current budget by $300,000.
Okay, so what we're looking at is more like 3/4 of that because we're already a quarter of the way through the year. So instead of 230, it's 75% of 230? Is that the way to look at it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's a number.
Was the number that you have on this was for a complete year or just what's left?
This was for. a
What's-
complete
yeah.
year.
Okay.
Okay, so a more accurate number would be about 75% of that.
Well, but we have 27 pay periods this year, not 26.
We're rounding. We're
So,
losing
yeah,
that
so
at a
she
round.
showed the distinction between this year and the impact for next year as well because of the pay period reduction.
Well, if we increase the jail by 10% right now and go forward, we're not going to see the full effect of it on the total budget, except that overtime should drop drastically.
Yes, sir. If we
Overtime should fund it.
If we
real
draw the
close to it.
applicants, and that was my concern when in the meeting last week that I expressed to Commissioner Castelline that I don't know what number is going to cause somebody to catch the ad and say, I'd apply for that job.
Shannon, do you know what the budgeted number for overtime is?
$30,000. 30,000 was into the year for overtime in the jail.
Right, so we don't get to count overtime as a
You
net
done
unless
spent
it's,
way more than that.
I spent 22,000 in January.
otherwise we'd be double counting overtime if it's not in the budget.
Well, he's actually spent $22,000.
If it's spent, then we're not saving it. I'm just saying that
No.
there's,
Thanks,
Oh,
Ed.
right,
And-
but it,
for a rough number, the best number to look at is 75% of about 230,000.
right. But if we keep going at the way we're going, we're going to
10% for jailers.
go way over that.
Fix it because we've already gone to a scheduled
Said I think
overtime
I
of
have a
24
motion
hours a
on the
day.
He
floor
wants
for
to call-
10% for jailers only. I
You call for the question?
All the motion was made and seconded, right, Commissioner Cheney?
Yes.
For 10% raise to the detention personnel only and the rest.
And that's the people that auditors had a list, which actually didn't include some of the some of the management people in there, I believe.
Is that correct?
That is
Okay.
correct.
Up to the lieutenant.
Okay.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Pat, I didn't hear you say aye or no.
I said aye.
That's a unanimous vote.
Yep.
Start with that and see what happens. All right, item number 6. Approve, disapprove accounts payable, payroll liabilities. I make the motion. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Second, Commissioner Russo. Roll call.
Before you do anything unusual?
No, ma'am. All this is the insurance invoices that were not ready for last week and we needed to get them done before next meeting. Okay.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Unanimous.
Give Christie a megaphone.
Okay, this is, we're gonna go into closed session. I need to read all that. Commissioners Court may enter into a closed session pursuant to section 551071, consideration of attorney-client privileges in real estate.
Oh, that's kind of disorienting, actually, to have a delay. That's right.
You're-
Might even
Okay,
be allowed to
we-
come before the bar.
Secretary.
Thank God.
Appreciate y'all using that, my 4 last pages of 4 different notebooks.
Oh, you get to go with a fresh, new, oh,
That's it. Yeah, I got-
that's very luxurious.
Got 3 or 4 out the car, these stragglers.
It's only, oh, we started at 8:15 by that clock. I was gonna say, there's no way it's only been an hour and 15 minutes.
Okay, we went into closed session at 10:50. We came out at 11:15. And I don't believe we have any action, so do I have a motion?
So move to adjourn.
Motion made and second, Commissioner Cashline. All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. Have a great day. I'm off to my next.